would you please join me in welcoming to the stage our special guest, President Bill Clinton.
This has been wonderful. I felt when Rachel was calling me up, as I did almost 50 years ago, actually exactly 50 years ago this month, when I gave my first speech as a young Arkansas Attorney General at this huge installation banquet of the Rotary Club. There were about 500 people there. It was one of those endless old-fashioned dinners when everyone, maybe 4 people, were not introduced. Everybody else was. They went home mad. We got there at 6, and they introduced me to speak at 9:30. Needless to say, not everyone was eager in anticipation. And then the guy that introduced me, who had been my campaign chairman in the area, eager to make a good appearance and to help his old friends, said, "You know, we could stop here and have had a very good evening." He didn't realize what he said. But we could stop here and have had a very good day. So let me begin by saying thank you to everyone. Thank you, Brona. Thank you, Tim Wheeler. Eliana and James, thank you. You were terrific. Thank you, Ro. Thank you, Neil. Thank you to my old friend, Bono, who once with his wife, Ollie, came to a dinner in Dublin for me 18 hours after his youngest child was born. She got out of bed and came to dinner, which shows you that women are inherently superior to men in every significant way. I love Neil Hannon's song. Thank you, Nicholas Trimble. He said, everyone who has ever been a father would be proud to have had that said about him. Rachel, I loved your grandfather very much and your grandmother, and I loved what you said. So indeed, we could have stopped here and had a very good evening, except we wouldn't get to hear Phil Coulter sing the town I love so well. And I would have come all the way here just to do that. I thank the Trimble family for being here, and all of you who put a human face on him. You know, I used to kid David that it was part of the old-fashioned tradition of the Ulster Protestants to pretend that they had no feeling, to be so proper that you seemed almost brittle. And I started looking directly in the eyes, and I said, you know, this guy's pretty funny. And he's really smart. And he's likely to lose his career by doing this, and he's doing it anyway. And I reminded Daphne tonight, the last time we had a good talk was after we were both out of office, and I was invited to speak in Jordan to a meeting of former Nobel Prize laureates. And they were there, and after one of the sessions, we were given 4 hours to go explore the wonderful, magnificent ruins of Petra. And if you ever get a chance to do it, you should. But I was out there schlocking around with David and Daphne, and he was like a little boy still, full of wonder and at peace, because he knew he'd done his part. I remember, it's hard to believe, it's been 9 years since John Hume and Pat and I walked across the Peace Bridge and met Martin McGuinness. I'm sorry that John and Pat aren't here. I'm sorry that David's not here. I'm sorry Seamus Mallon's not here. I'm sorry Martin McGuinness didn't live to see this day. And Mark Drinkin, I'm glad you are here. And everybody else who's survived to that day. Mayor Duffy, I thank you for welcoming me back to a city I love in this Guildhall, which I love so much. My memories here go back a long way, as you know. Colum Eastwood, thank you for being here and for being a voice of sanity and peace in the Parliament. Thank you, Don Purvis, and everyone at the Hume Foundation for continuing the important work of John and Pat. And I want to thank particularly all of you and for the dedication of the song to Lyra McKee on what would have been the 4th anniversary of her death. Her life was a testament to the unlimited potential of the people of Northern Ireland, and especially its rising generation. And her death is a powerful reminder that there are few permanent victories in politics or life. And if we believe something, we need to be willing to stand for it as long as we draw breath. We owe it to her to choose, in her words, to say goodbye to bombs and bullets once and for all. This audience is made up mostly of people who were younger than Lyra. You will decide what to do with it. I was really pleased that wonderful film about her was produced with the support of Hidden Lights, the documentary company that Hillary and our daughter Chelsea founded, which seeks to tell the stories of what they call gutsy women all over the world. Most of you here were born after the Good Friday Agreement, but it was your future that John Hume and David Trimble were thinking about. I promise they were. We talked about it many times. They were thinking about those of you who weren't here then. You have inherited a freedom to pursue your dreams instead of reliving your parents' nightmares. You were talented, energetic, creative, more focused on what unites you and your neighbors and what divides you. You were the hope, not just of Northern Ireland, but of places divided all over the world today. The great struggle of the 21st century so far has turned out to be simply a modern techno version fueled by the miracles of social media, a version of the oldest demon of humanity. Must we be afraid of those who are different? The older I get, the more I become interested in things that are either really, really big or really, really small, because I think it helps to keep those of us caught in the middle humble. For example, I was president when we finished the international consortium to sequence the human genome for the first time. And we've seen lots and lots of beneficial spin-offs of it, advances in medical care, things that will lengthen life. But the most important thing on this 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement was the initial analysis of the genome, and we have 3.6 billion of them each in our body. Pretty good number. That if you look around this room, and if you walk out today, and if you travel to Timbuktu, every non-age-related difference you can find anywhere in the world, gender, body size, body type, sexual orientation, you name it, any difference you can find that is not age-related is rooted in 0.5% of your genome. Why do we spend 99.5% of our time obsessing over that 0.5%? And almost no time thinking about the implications of the fact that we are 99.5% the same. That was a question before the research had been completed that John Hume and David Trimble and other good people who gave us this piece spent a lifetime pondering. After 9/11 in America, when people all over the world were worried about terror, I was invited to a seminar, a religious seminar, if you will, on the politics of religious differences in the Middle East. And among other things, other delegates, the person who represented the most militant Islamic groups in the Pakistani parliament were there. And as always happens to me, whenever I'm anywhere like this, I'm thinking about Ireland. How did it happen? What relevance is it for this? When I'm helping Rwanda pick up the ashes of the genocide where 800,000 or 900,000 people were killed in 90 days, I think about Ireland. When I work with Mandela until he couldn't work anymore in his 90s, I think about Ireland. And in addition to the smallness of this, I try to put it in the context of the largeness of our universe and our place in it. There are now more than 1 billion identified galaxies, not planets, galaxies in the universe, and it is continuing to expand. I remember the first picture that we all saw of a black hole in the universe that was 55 million light years away. Remember that? And had all the fire burning all around it? So I was listening to this physicist explain it. He said, this is a powerful magnet, the most powerful one we have ever seen. If our whole solar system, the Earth and all of our other planets and our sun pass by close enough, They would all be sucked in and immediately turn into a pile of dust that would fit into a large thimble. And I'm sitting there at home drinking my coffee saying, well, guess it doesn't matter which president's on Mount Rushmore, does it? The credit in life that I'm convinced the good Lord will give the peacemakers is that they didn't need to know stuff like that to know it. They didn't have to get beat over the head to have common sense and a good heart. But it helps to remember. I celebrated as president the 30th anniversary of the American astronaut Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. And they brought a moon rock, vacuum packed in a clear encasement for us to hold for the photo op. And I asked the NASA director, I said, you know, I've been good to the space program and I care about it, and I want you to let me borrow that till I leave office. I said, you know, the White House is reasonably secure, the Secret Service is here, it'll be all right. And I put it on the table that if you've ever seen a White House and you see people meeting in the Oval Office, there's two big couches and a table. I put the moon rock on the table, thinking about Ireland. And whenever people came in to meet and they started screaming at each other and they were so mad and they couldn't get along, I would say, wait, time out. You see that rock? Neil Armstrong brought it off the moon. It has been carbon dated at 3.6 billion years old. Almost as old as our Milky Way in a 14 billion year old universe. I said, so you see, we're all just passing through. What do you say we settle down and do something good? We honor David and John and the others who made the peace because they didn't have to know that to do it. Every faith leads us to the most important political verse in the Christian New Testament. The Christian New Testament says, most important virtue is to love God with all your heart. And the second is, quote, like unto it, to love your neighbor as yourself. And we know that our neighbors included the Samaritans, of whom there are still 200,000, who were then viewed as the other. The Torah says, he who turns aside a stranger might as well turn away from the Most High God. The Quran says that Allah put different people on the earth, not that they might despise one another, but that they might come to know one another and learn from one another. The Buddhists read in their Dhammapada that no one is fully human unless they can feel the arrow piercing another's skin as if it were piercing their own. So you can pick your religion. But it all comes down to elevating our brief, fleeting lives and our common humanity. Which is why I argued in this speech to the Muslims that the most important political verses in the Christian New Testament are often read at weddings wrongly. Love is this, love is that. The beautiful letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. But the love is agape, not romantic love, love of your fellow human beings. And at the end of the litany of love, St. Paul explains why Now abide us these three, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. How, if you believe in a religion, could you possibly believe anything is greater than faith? Because, he says, comparing our lives, which we still have and have to decide what to do with, on earth, with the afterlife with God, now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now we know in part, but then we will know even as we are known. John and David and the people who made the Irish peace said, let's get over ourselves. We all see through a glass darkly. We all know in part. Even a broken clock is right twice a day, and nobody's right all the time. And we are fated to spend our whole lives trying to get as far away from the broken clock model as possible and as close to being right all the time as possible, but we'll never get to that extreme. And no matter how much we dislike our enemies, they'll never get to the other one. So what do you say we do something to lift our brief lives and our children's lives and our grandchildren's lives? That is the ultimate gift of the Good Friday Accord. Oh, today we're discussing what it would take to get Stormont back up, and I think that's important, and based on what I've heard, it can fairly easily be done if we want to, but you can always find an excuse to say no. If you're having a fight in your home, you can always find an excuse to say no. If you're struggling with any kind of relationship or struggle, you can always find an excuse to say no. Getting to yes is humanity's great trial and great goal. The people we honor today got to yes. I can remember virtually every encounter, virtually every conversation I ever had with John Hume and with David Trimble. Trimble was so modest, and I never thought he quite got the credit he deserved. But he and John, I was talking to them both once, and I said, you realize that if we do this deal, it'll totally hose you both. And they smiled and they said, why do you think that? I said, because people always get buyer's remorse when they take a flying leap. If you buy a new home you can't quite afford the mortgage on, you wonder if you checked the pipes well enough in the cellar. Anytime people take a flying leap, they get buyer's remorse. So the temptation is, okay, I agreed to join this deal, and now that I'm stuck with these other people, I better hire the people to represent me who will be just as mean and tough as possible. And it happened, didn't it? So Seamus Mallet was the first second minister, or deputy first minister, and then Martin came in. And since he's not here, I want to brag on him. We were so lucky that when he was education minister in the first government, the first budget he proposed had more money for the poor schools in the Protestant areas than elsewhere, because he wanted to show people that we could be fair and decent to each other, we could hear each other's claims and cries, and that he, who had probably known more violence than anybody else that they were actually dealing with, knew all too well what a dead end it was and how important it was to lay it down. So here you are, 25 years on. Here you are, those of you who were not born then. There are very few permanent victories or defeats in politics or life. You have to get up every day and decide what to do with this day. Then you have to live in the present and for the future. That is the obligation that those of us, no matter how old we get, have to those who come behind. That is really the job imposed on everyone who has responsibility for others, whether they're parents or public officials or something in between, to live in the present and for the future. So, the reason I loved the cure at Troy so much, and I was so glad that Rhoda read for me, is that I've even talked to a lot of Irish people that don't know the story of the cure at Troy. It was Seamus's attempt to basically write an old-fashioned Greek play in the form used by Oedipus. That's what the chorus is. It's the crowd talking. And it's about Philoctetes, who was the greatest of all archers in Greek mythology, gifted with a magic bow, which always found its way home with its arrows as long as Philoctetes was firing them. He was horribly wounded in one of the early battles of the Trojan War, and his leg was rotting out, and they were afraid that his wounds would delay the others from getting away, so they dumped him on an island in the middle of the Aegean, a small, rock-strewn, uncomfortable, miserable island. And for 10 years, he stayed there alone. Then Ulysses realized he was still alive, and they needed him back, and they probably couldn't defeat Troy without him. So he went with another young man to the island and sent the young guy to try to put, we say at home, put a shine on Philoctetes and, tell him some story and hope he would know it. Philoctetes knew exactly who he was and exactly what the deal was, and that they needed him again. He could have been very angry, but he came anyway. The cure at Troy could have really been called the cure on that island. So he grabbed his bow and he said, I know what you want, and I am Greek and I will come. And his leg had turned into a stump. He hadn't bathed or shaved or anything except in the water in a decade. And he limped down to the boat, got on, rowed on with them to Troy, and the rest is history. So the most important thing you can remember about this day is what Seamus Heaney said to me. When he heard me reading that, he was in Dublin, and he scribbled off the lines I read, and then wrote a P.S., and he repeated the line in the Cure at Troy that Philoctetes said as he rode away forever. It was a fortunate wind that blew me here. Even our travails can be fortunate if we learn from them. The tragedy is in false pride and a false sense of superiority and a false belief that our differences matter more than our common humanity. We honor two people who put their lives and their careers on the line, who embodied wisdom we all like to believe we share, but often, when the chips are down, cannot live by. I loved and admired them both. But what they stood for is alive in your lives. Now, you, like them, must decide what to do about it. And may you always have people who love you say that it was a fortunate wind that blew you here. God bless you and good luck.
Thank you so much, President Clinton. Very special.